All right, y'all, let's talk about stimming and autism and why so many people who get diagnosed later in life look back and they realize, oh, wow, I used to do that as a kid. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know it was called stimming. So you have to understand that when you're a kid, a lot of things that you do will be chalked up as, oh, they're 7 years old. That's what kids do. Whether you're, tapping your feet, clapping your hands, whatever stem you have, even if it's a vocal stem, sometimes people say, oh, that child is just being loud. That's just what, kids do. Boys be boys, girls be girls. Kids are just loud. And it's not until sometimes you watch videos like this and you go back and you rewind a mental tape and you're like, oh, wow, I did this almost every single day as a kid. How come nobody ever caught it? So education is quite important, and I love videos like this because it helps us connect the dots.
Wow, you don't seem autistic to me. That's because I'm really hot. You're not supposed to say that. Oh.
I'll get to the point here. Autism does not have a look. And a lot of people think that autism looks a certain way, or if you look a certain way, you can't have autism. And I tell people all the time, there's no visual marker of autism. You can't look at somebody and say, oh, that person's autistic or that person doesn't have it. And a lot of people confuse autism with other things. I think that people confuse autism with Down syndrome. I've seen people confuse it with intellectual disability. Just because you're autistic, that does not mean that you have an intellectual disability, although a lot of people who are on the spectrum do have intellectual disabilities. I'm trying not to confuse you all here, but the main point of this video is that there is no look to autism spectrum disorder. It's a condition that affects how you communicate with the world, and we're all beautiful in our own way. I don't know how I did it. All right, so I saw this video, and my first thought was, how did this guy pull the autistic girl? And without even looking through his profile, my first thought was, he's probably autistic himself, or he's neurodivergent and he has ADHD, or he has a couple of special interests or, some hyperfixations, or he's able to relate to her experience some way, somehow. And after I had my thoughts, I went through it, I looked through his profile, and guess what? Guess what I found? I saw a video where he was talking about when you pull somebody who was just as autistic as you, and I was like, bingo, that's the answer. They're both autistic. And that's one of the cool things about being neurodivergent, because it's almost like it's its own language, because we communicate with the world in different ways than neurotypical people do. So sometimes if you're neurodivergent and you're single and you're looking for your person, you might have to find somebody who communicates the same way that you do.
Just a little silly. And you cry when you have to leave.
What's the connection between autism and rocks? I will not lie to y'all. I don't know the answer. I'll just tell you that from the jump. I don't know the answer, but I have a couple of theories on this. I think that obviously when you're neurodivergent, whether it's ADHD or autism, you can have these special interests and hyperfixations. It could be rocks. It could be other things. It could be certain objects that shine a certain way. Maybe it might be objects that feel a certain way. It might be a sensory thing. So I'm still trying to figure out the connection. I had an autistic girlfriend a couple of years ago, and she would collect rocks, and then she showed them to me, and then, me with ADHD, I'd look at one rock and I would forget what I was doing before, and I would get distracted. And I would never pay attention to rocks before. So I think, it's a different way of communicating, but it's pretty cool. So, y'all in the comment section, show me some of y'all favorite rocks. I'd love to see them.
Shit. As soon as they can't find their wallet and their keys, then they start picking shit up. Put all these shoes away. Hanging these jackets.
It blew my mind when I realized that not everybody left the house like this. If this is how a lot of your mornings are, don't feel bad about yourself. A lot of people have this experience, but you have to understand that being neurodivergent in a world that is set up for neurotypical people, you have to create a whole new world for yourself. I say it all the time, and not to make it seem like you have to do extra work, but you have to make a couple of adjustments. You have to shift things around. You have to create a new ecosystem where your strengths are highlighted, and the things that you don't do too well at, you can go get the help that you need. It's going to be a brand new world, but in this world, you will be able to love the person that you are. You'll be able to respect yourself. You won't beat yourself up too much, and you'll be able to thrive and get out of survival mode, because that ain't no fun.
Just in a dream, trying to fight. I knew I wanted to punch, and I just kept missing.
All right, let's talk about ADHD and depression. This is kind of like that what came first argument, the chicken or the egg. And between ADHD and depression, I'm not sure what comes first, but what I can tell you is that people with ADHD, 7 out of 10 of them do go on to develop depression. And with women who have ADHD, a lot of them are diagnosed later in life, late 20s, 30s, sometimes 40s and 50s. And a lot of times you go to a doctor and you tell them what you're going through and you describe your symptoms and you get diagnosed with a mood disorder like depression and or bipolar disorder, or they might say they have a little bit of anxiety. So it's important to realize that when you've been depressed for a long time, or when your depression seems like it just can't be fixed by anything else, you should consider the fact that you may want to pursue an ADHD diagnosis, or at least start to look into it, because once you put all the pieces together and things make sense to you, that's when your life starts to change.
Mimics well. My father and his father were alcoholics. They were also, like me, autistic as hell.
I don't think a lot of people realize that many neurodivergent individuals will use substances not as a way to fit in or to change their personality, but more so as a way to feel normal. People wonder, does autism mix well with alcohol? And I love this video because the guy was upfront. He said, yeah, it mixes well. Alcohol, just like benzos, numbs you, allows you to not have to deal with so much overwhelming anxiety at that point in time. You're able to mingle with people, you're able to laugh and be giggly, you're not worried about so many things. And for a lot of neurodivergent individuals, when they use substances, this is the only time that they feel quote unquote normal, or they don't feel so much like an outsider. So I think it's important, especially for parents, when you see your child who has ADHD or your autistic child, when they're using substances, a lot of times it's not because they actually want.
What do you think is a misconception that people have about dating someone with autism? Well, the biggest misconception for people on the autism spectrum, especially us women with autism, is that we have been infantilized for so long, and I just don't like being infantilized.
All right, this video here is interesting for a couple of reasons. Now, number one, autistic women on average normally get diagnosed later than males. So if you're a woman who's diagnosed later in life and you've had relationship issues and you felt like your partner is babying you, or you don't have any autonomy, it can be very frustrating when you get the diagnosis and then you're like, oh my goodness, this whole time it was autism. Number two, keep in mind that when you're autistic, a big part of your life revolves around you trying to have some sort of autonomy. So in a relationship, if you don't feel like you have some sort of control, or if decisions are being made for you, you'll never feel like you have equal say, and it's going to be a very frustrating dating experience.
So please?
Why?
Because it's distracting me.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
If you're dating somebody who's autistic, you've got to understand that when it comes down to doing the Mickey Ficky, you all might not take the most linear path to getting there. So you've had a long day, you come home to your partner, it's time to do the Mickey Ficky, but before you all can get started, your partner might get distracted by the lights, the sounds, the textures of the bed sheets, the objects in the way. And the thing I like about this video is the guy clearly understands who his autistic wife is. So instead of him being frustrated, or instead of it turning into an argument, he's laughing with her. He's probably been through this before. So just understand that if you're dating somebody with certain special sensory needs, it may take a while to get to the Mickey Ficky, but keep your mood in check. We're going to get there in time. It's got to be a little bit.
What is pathological demand avoidance? Why is it so important to talk about? And why does this sometimes feel like anxiety? So pathological demand avoidance is when a task is given to somebody and this task feels like a demand, and this demand feels like a perceived loss of autonomy. So when you think about autistic individuals who go the majority of their life relying on external support, somebody else, some other thing, any bit of autonomy that they can hold on to is very, very important. So the way you say things, the way you word things is important, because if it feels like a demand, they will feel sometimes helpless and powerless, right? And what is anxiety? Anxiety is an involuntary commitment to indecision. So when you have all these demands and it's paralyzing, it can feel like anxiety sometimes. So this is important stuff to understand.